You're listening to More Than Reports, and I'm your host, Paul B. Felix.
In this episode, Paul and Alex discuss the hidden implications of using cloud vendors for data storage and processing. Tune in to learn about the key factors that should influence your decision.
Paul, I was talking to a new client, and we start making assessments, and so we're gonna go AWS, Azure, maybe you have GCP, and they tell me, no, the server is on that closet there, and we run it in house. I raise an eyebrow. Oh, that's an interesting surprise, and my brain fires up and say, well, this is different. I didn't expect that. Does this even make sense? It's 2024. You expect everything to be on the cloud. So is our client crazy?
They're not crazy, no. I can definitely see the cloud as being a great option for a lot of use cases, but not every use case. In fact, the market we work in, I think a lot of the time, it may not be. I would say this: it's certainly not a no-brainer that going to the cloud is the way to go.
And why is that? I mean, how is it a no-brainer anymore? We take it so for granted, and
Yeah.
at times when you do the math, right?
Yeah, I think it is about the math and the processes. Um, I guess to get into that, we need to talk about what the cloud offers and who's it right for, and what exactly is the cloud. Maybe we start there. What are we talking about? Like
Right.
you're mentioning a data closet. I think generally that's what everybody's thinking about is the cloud's going to replace my closet. So now I don't have to maintain this data center, let's call it. A lot of small companies might just have a closet with the rack in it or something that has a few servers. Um, and, it's great. We can get rid of that. We don't have to upgrade that thing anymore. We don't have to worry about the air conditioning going out or the power going out, or, we got a lot less security concerns potentially. I wouldn't say that definitively, but potentially we could have some lesser security concerns. And maybe we can save on some manpower. I think that's the overall appeal. Well, I think the other piece is that with the cloud, it's it's essentially, I guess, elastic, right? You can provision anything you want in seconds. You don't have to worry about ordering a server from Dell and shipping the darn thing into your data center and physically hooking it up. Instead, you just go into one of these infrastructure providers portals and click a few buttons, and there you go. You've got a virtual resource available, provision for you right there, which is it's pretty exciting. That I definitely wouldn't be somebody that says the cloud is not a game changer. It certainly is a game changer for so many companies. I mean, look at us. We spend a lot of money in the cloud every month, and it's definitely something that we are always looking at. Um, I think it comes down to what are your needs? What are your needs? If if your needs work out so that the cloud is the right solution, then go to the cloud. If not, I would, I think like you started off with here, a lot of people just jump to the conclusion now that look, the cloud's the way to go. Let's go to the cloud. It really isn't that all the time. I think there's a good percentage of use cases that still makes sense to maintain your own hardware.
Right. And I think we should make sure we cover, well, we're here to talk about things data. And to me, the harder I think about it, it seems to be one of those workloads where that math becomes a little trickier. I'll give examples. If you just want to run a CRM, and our minds naturally or quickly go to Salesforce and HubSpot and all these systems that are great and they have been super successful. Um, and I don't think it would make any sense to say, hey, give me Siebel from 1990 and run it on my server anymore. It's the kind of service where um, the savings of running that piece of software on their infrastructure, then that is the no-brainer right there. So there's the cloud of the apps, software as a service. Let's do acronyms, SaaS. We
Right.
talk about a lot about that. But then there's other clouds, right? And I think when we're doing budgeting exercises and we're trying to account for what we're about to spend on a certain piece of technology, those definitions matter because that is going to give you the mental map with which to tackle the economical problem. What are we doing here? So let's go back to our client that runs their application in a mini data center, quote
Right.
the closet.
Yep.
What they have there is an older system, and immediately my mind goes back to, oh, large banks still run COBOL systems, not because they like COBOL, but the math tells them I'm a billions and billions of dollars organization, and I do treat my money very, very carefully. If they're running COBOL, I assume they have done enough math to prove that, as bad as it sounds, I'm still making money on it, so I'll keep it. And
Uh,
that's true of many assets. And I'm going away from technology now. If you're a factory and your plant still works and produces good products, why replace with the latest digital technology, right? If it passes the regulations. So there's a number of situations in business where the math trumps everything, right? There is no modernity. There is no edge that will surpass good economics. And this is basically what we're talking about here. So um,
yes.
cloud is great, and uh, you gave good examples there. Labor is the first thing that we think, right?
Yeah. Well, I would go back to what you just said. I guess it is kind of I guess a hierarchy of decisions. It's at least a set of decisions that need to be looked at. You were talking about someone that's running an actual, server-based software. So they probably purchased some perpetual license, right?
Correct.
And maybe a CRM system. So if we're going to talk about CRM, well, what is that company doing? How many business processes do they have dependent on that system? So look at that. And then, well, do we even have the option to go, let's say, just serverless or software as a service? Do we have that option? If the answer is yes, well, maybe that's the right way to go, right? Because when you go to, let's just say, Salesforce or any other online system, you're going to have a lot of value added right there, I would say, if that's appropriate. But when you really start looking at it, and that same company that is running their CRM system on an in-house blade or something, potentially they've already paid for the perpetual license. They own that software at that point. Given they may have to pay for updates and that sort of thing incrementally, but they likely already have some out-of-pocket expense invested in that solution. And then who knows how many business processes are integrated with that solution. And it's generally easier to take a system where you have direct access to the back end, the database behind that CRM system, and do things with it. Like maybe they have alerts going out to certain sales reps to notify them of potential opportunities, or maybe they have, who knows, any types of reporting solutions. Obviously, that's what we do, but you could have all types of BI systems on top of that solution. And then you start looking, okay, well, if I move to Salesforce or any other software as a service provider, how am I going to gain access to that system? Well, in Salesforce, well, now I've got to go learn SQL. They've got their own flavor of SQL. I've got to learn their API. I've got to have new replication processes if I want to mimic that in-house solution. I got to replicate that data somehow or gain access to that data. Not replication, not the only way to do it, but it's certainly one of the ways to do it. And now I've got to go buy another piece of software potentially. And I've got to have someone that understands how to do those things, right? So these things add up pretty darn quickly. It's not a cut and dry answer that says, oh, yeah, let's just dump our in-house, on-premise solution and go to a SaaS solution. If a SaaS solution is not available, What would the solution? Well, look at insurance. We do a lot of work in the insurance industry, and there's plenty of policy administration systems that companies use that are either run in an on-house piece of software or hardware, or they're essentially hosted on hardware by the vendor, right? Which is not the same as software as a service. They're just hosting the solution on a server for their clients. So there's no option in that case, unless you're going to retool completely to go to software as a service. So now we got a different situation. When you're running, most business applications are going to have a back end. That back end is going to have some type of database vendor technology on it. Well, now you've got at least an app server and a database server, potentially two servers, right? And these servers need to be on 24/7 most of the time, because you've got your business operating on those things at any time. Now, when you start renting and you're paying for servers or any resource 24/7, you're going to start spending some money. The clock is going to always be ticking, and you are going to spend a significant amount of money. And this is where you really need to look at things carefully. There are ways to use cloud offerings, I think, more economically than just going out there and selecting everything you might need. You can spend a lot more money than you have to, I guess is what I would say. Things like portable licensing. If you've already purchased an operating system license, or even let's say SQL Server license, you can port that license into the cloud so that you're not repaying for that license after you move to the cloud, just as one example. Other examples are how you handle backups. Backups, unfortunately, in the cloud can be very expensive. They add up very quickly. It's quite easy to say, I want backups every day for the last 1 year, right? And as soon as you start doing the math on that, it can be very, very expensive, depending on, obviously what you're backing up, the size of it, and different variables. So anyway, it isn't a cut and dry thing here when we say, yeah, the cloud is great, everybody should just don't even think about it anymore, go to the cloud. No. I think there's still a lot of other advantages to having your systems in-house. I mean, one advantage I would say is, who do you think is a bigger target, Azure or some mom and pop shop that has a server in their closet? I would say Azure, and I would say AWS. If someone wants to do bad things, malicious things, there's a lot hanging out there in Azure and AWS and whatever, Google Cloud, any other infrastructure, Oracle. But which one's more secure? I would say AWS is most likely more secure. Azure is more secure. Their business depends on having infrastructure that is secure. And we've had very good success with maintaining very sensitive environments in these cloud infrastructures. But I still think when it boils down to it, if you were going to just simply say who's the bigger target, well, the bigger target is the large infrastructure aggregators, not this mom and pop shop that I think that has a server in their closet.
Yeah. So let me review some of the points we covered here. I think they're interesting. Number one, it is important to have a clear understanding of what the differences are between the pieces of technology we're dealing with. I'll give a little bit of a detail here. Sometimes you have an application. It works well for you in-house. If you have an equivalent in the cloud, the functionally equivalent, and there's not a ton of integration, that's where the no-brainers typically.
Most likely, yeah. That's most likely something you should seriously consider.
If you just need to run your books, if you need to run, we keep going back to CRM, such a well-established category.
Right.
These days, even ERP, and it's functionally sufficient, you should have no issues selecting cloud. It does what it needs to do,
Right.
and I guess the apportioning of the cost, or meaning the savings of running something at scale, which the vendors does and allocates to you, really reduces cost. Things do get more complicated when we factor in more bespoke systems where you can't just subscribe to something online and go, where you
Right.
have to make
Custom.
considerations around integration, access to the
Mhm.
back end. So in that case, we're past the world of SaaS, software as a service, and then we start thinking infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, which is more technology backend in those
Right.
cases. A second concern that we covered here is security. Um, it's kind of a tie, right? I mean, it's hard to fall on one side or the other. Both are complex. Cybersecurity is a hot topic these days, but the cloud doesn't instantly give you an advantage. You need, and I'll say, I do a little bit of security work, and it's laborious in the
It's also
cloud.
expensive, right? I mean, you can see even in our little company what we spend on, again, here's this add-on service that you can pay for,
Right,
right? Now we're paying for it every month,
right,
every single month. It's very easy to get started, but
right.
when you really look at it, you're paying a heck of a lot of money. Not to say you wouldn't pay something if you were doing it in-house. You'd have to go buy some solution, right? You'd probably buy a perpetual license, and then you'd have to learn how to use it and implement it.
Hmm.
I agree with what you said there. It's not from the security perspective, maybe we say it's a tie. I'm sure somebody that's listening to this is like, no way, that A or B, whichever side is much better of an option. But, I think I agree with what you're saying there. I can see some pros and cons to both sides of that equation, both from cost, complexity, capabilities. There's just a lot of things to consider there on the security front.
But things do get quite a bit more interesting when we go into the realm of data. Because, before
Yep.
we get there, and the way I'm getting there is, well, now I have all these systems. I have an HR cloud provider, I have a CRM cloud provider, even my transactional system is cloud. I'm happy. I pay these subscriptions, they seem to make sense. I never touch a server. But now I need to build a data warehouse. I want to unify all these systems into one single view of my business. And I need to make investment decisions.
Right. Yep.
And I think that puts us squarely not in the SaaS world. Yes, you will have one piece of the data stack in the cloud. Maybe your BI vendor says, yeah, you just subscribe here and tell me where your data is. That moment there, tell me where your data is.
Right.
There's a switch. There's a
Yeah.
big shift in the type of uh, mental reasoning we need to do here, which is the math. You were saying, you give an example. I need to gain access to the back end, and can therein lies a time sink for a labor sink, one of those points where we're going to potentially do disproportionate amounts of investment. What's your take on that?
Well, I want to probably obvious here, but the main cost in data solutions is labor. It's not the technology, right? So um, it's one thing to look at these technical solutions and say A is cheaper and better than B, but if A causes your team to waste time, well, it's no longer cheaper and better, right? It is costing you money. It's actually a loss scenario. So it's not like you can do all this stuff in a vacuum. It's really holistic. And I think the other thing you pointed out is it's not all or nothing. On the front end, the data visualization tools, it's pretty much a no-brainer nowadays. That's a common need. There's wonderful tools available, software as a service, right? Tableau, Power BI, Looker, whatever you want to use to visualize your data. Well, there's a tool out there that can help you get that done. In most cases, it is not going to make sense anymore to host a BI front end. I said most, not all. There's other solutions that still sell perpetual license, and there's certain use cases that it just wouldn't make sense to change. I remember one company I worked for years ago, they were actually extending reporting services, SQL Server reporting services, to do all kinds of stuff. Basically, they were using it for, I want to say I'm going to just call it a billing system where they would automate all types of reports that would go out by using the reporting services engine. So they were tightly integrated with that. And it wouldn't be something that can easily, let's say, port over to Power BI because that wasn't the actual use case they had. But outside of those edge cases, the front end I think is pretty much a no-brainer nowadays. The default should be software as a service for the BI tool, front end tool. On the data side, man, there's just so much to think about here. Just talking about the landscape when it comes to data, you have platform as a service, as you've mentioned, and you have infrastructure as a service, and then you can just do it on premise, right? It's basically where you're at. So when we talk about on-prem, I think it's the easiest one to understand. I've got a blade, I've got a closet, or heck, I just got a server or even a laptop that's on my network. I can consider that my my hardware where I'm going to run my data warehouse. It really depends. Years ago, I did a video. I'm sure everybody's already seen it. Just kidding. But it was about, what are the three main mistakes people make about data warehousing? I still believe that one of the biggest mistakes people make is they think that they got to put everything in the world in their data warehouse. And that's not the case. It's about adding valuable data, useful data to your warehouse. So if you take that approach, then obviously that is going to scale back your costs because you don't have terabytes or petabytes of data that need to be retained in this repository. Okay, so that's the on-premise side. Do it however you want. You've got a lot of flexibility. Likely the costs are under control. Yes, you have to maintain it. But I want to hit on this maintenance thing. I hear all the time on the pros of going to the cloud. You don't have to maintain your server, right? Let's just call it a server. Well, great. You don't have to maintain your server. How much time does it actually take to maintain a server? How much expertise does it take? Do you have that time and expertise? I can tell you, like a shop like us, where we have plenty of people that have technical skills, it does not take much time or much expertise to maintain a server. It just doesn't. In fact, our delivery managers, who are not core developers, handle 90+% of the server maintenance that needs to happen, and the other 10% is automated. So I think that part of the situation is overblown. However, let's move on to, I guess, infrastructure as a service, because it's the most closely related to just having your hardware on premise. It's just you're going to have virtual hardware in the cloud. You're going to run a virtual machine, and you're going to run whatever software you need on that virtual machine. So, instead of having the hardware on-prem, you have hardware in the cloud. And then the third option, platform as a service, is when you're going to subscribe to some type of platform. Like, you can subscribe to a SQL database, or you can subscribe to Redshift, or you can subscribe to Synops or Snowflake, right? These are platforms that you can subscribe to. And most of the time, they're going to charge you on a use-based situation, right? How much are you using this solution? Well, that's how much you're going to be paying for that platform.
Consumption. I think a term that became popular is the consumption. And there's we need to break down consumption into two things. The two things you consume here. When you're computing, and you're going to hear this term compute, that's when just the computer is working, the CPU is doing cycles. But then there's the storage. Storage is cheap. Well, if you have too much, you're going to pay for storage as well. We're just talking about backup can add up. So platform is when it's not the application. There is no business function. There is technology that lends itself to anything you want it to be. And it's important to understand that, when doing the math, those things need to be taken into account.
Yeah. When you buy a platform, you've bought a hammer, right? You haven't bought a
It's a
solution.
tool.
It's just a tool. When you buy a server, it's just a tool, right? It's going to take people to build a data structure that's going to support your analytics.
Right.
So that's kind of that back to that point that, I'll just pick any platform like Redshift. If you've got a team that doesn't understand Redshift or Snowflake, and you go subscribe to Snowflake, you are going to be probably disappointed, because you've now got to get your team up to speed with that solution, and they have to, basically be retrained to be able to use it appropriately.
And the cost of that is going to dwarf anything
that'll
you
dwarf what
thought
it
you
costs.
spent on cloud, right?
Yeah, the cloud cost.
As high or low as it is, will always
Right.
going to be obliterated by your labor costs.
Nearly always, absolutely. The labor is where it's all at, as far as the cost of building these data solutions. I know we're about out of time, but I got to throw our one nugget in here for people that do decide to go to infrastructure as a service, which is what we most commonly use here at Leapfrog BI, is infrastructure as a service. And that is that when you're using infrastructure as a service, you on each of these whatever cloud platforms, we use Azure, you have the ability to stop the billing. This is a very, very important point. With platform as a service, with some cases set aside, you generally are going to always be paying for that platform. Again, it's consumption based. There's all kind of scenarios that we can't go into right now. But talking about infrastructure, you can actually deallocate infrastructure. You can say, look, I'm not using this virtual machine. And when you do so, you have stopped the billing. So that little bitty thing right there, if you leverage it, you can find ways to really, really drastically reduce your cost on data structures or data solutions, the infrastructure tied to data solutions. And that's just simply turn the darn thing on when you need it. And when you don't need it, turn it off. Now, how can you turn your data warehouse off and still be successful in your BI solution? Again, that's architecture discussion. There's ways of doing it. But that's probably another show there, Alex.
Yeah, that one there is amazing. I mean, it's huge for infrastructure as a service. With a simple technique, you can, in this case, swing the pendulum big time towards cloud. If you
Oh yeah,
simply leverage, and then your server is not even running anymore. It doesn't exist, so it's the best of both
that's right.
worlds.
That's
Uh,
right. And remember,
thing
you're paying not only for the server, but you're often renting the software,
right.
right?
The
And you can
the
stop that renting of the software as well.
Correct. So the odd man out in my observation is platform as a service. It came as such promise. It is an incredible business success for the companies that offer that, but it turns
Yep.
out not to be that simple. And I think we can
No.
wrap with that. Why not? What makes platform? Well, let's spell it out. What makes it running databases on the cloud so challenging economically?
It's expensive often. It doesn't have to be. I don't. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there going to be saying, "Well, you can do it really cheaply." But let's just take Fabric. Fabric is something we've been looking at pretty closely since it came out. It's Microsoft's kind of um, all-inclusive, I guess, cloud data, all
Platform.
types of data solutions, right? That's not a very good description, but hopefully people know what I'm talking about there. Um, the cost of that solution, when we look at it, and again, our Leapfrog BI, we work mainly with mid-sized organizations. These are not organizations that are, in the Fortune 500 that can go drop $1 million on their data infrastructure, and be fine. We're talking about companies that don't want to spend or cannot spend, don't have the value to justify spending $10,000 or more a month on their data structure. That just doesn't make sense for them. Set aside the cost of the labor to build and maintain that thing. So when you look at tools like Fabric, just go look. I would just say go look at the cost. It's public. You can go look at the cost and see what it is. You can quickly get over $10,000 in cost when you're using that type of a solution. Not saying you have to get over that level. But one of the challenges with Fabric, and I'm actually talking to some of the Microsoft reps right now because Fabric is pretty early, and one of the suggestions I made is, look, let us pause our Fabric platform as a subscription or platform as a service resource, but enable Power BI, which is actually part of Fabric now, it can be, enable Power BI to still access the data repository that was built in Fabric. If we could do that, well, that's a different situation because now we have that on-off thing going on and we can reduce the cost drastically. But that's not the case right now. Yes, you can pause Fabric, but if you do, well, guess what? All of your Power BI data sets are not going to work and you pretty much have nothing to offer your end users. I kind of went on a tangent there, Alex, but hopefully I'm hitting on the crux of the issue, which is you've got to just go look at the cost and see if it's appropriate.
You have to. You cannot get around that for the reasons we just discussed. Saving money is a survival imperative if you're a mid-sized company. And to me, it came down to you and I were having a discussion. And I said, well, look at this cost. It's 20 cents, some insignificant number per hour. But you sent me a quick text. It's one database. And it took me a couple of minutes. I said, what does he mean? Oh, yeah. Many times we need to run multiple databases, a config database,
Oh,
a
yeah.
staging database, a test database, a dev database, my throwaway database. And as you add those up, you will need one platform as a service account or database or service. And when you own your own infrastructure, which you can have on the cloud, you can have as many databases as you want in that one server. Yes, you need to go in there and deal with the administration of that one server. Other than that, you're free
Right.
and you're not paying up. It's unlimited based on how much hardware you have. And
Well,
therein, I
and
think, and therein lies a huge savings that needs to be considered.
yes, and I think everything we're talking about has nuances, right? Like you're talking about SQL databases as a
Mhm.
service. Well, you could go buy a SQL managed instance as a service. Well, guess what? You're going to spend $1,000 a month on a SQL managed instance. Yeah, you can have as many databases as you want, but you just have a SQL managed instance. How are you going to deal with your other issues that you have when you're building warehouses, like simple file system,
Mm.
the need for a file system, or the need for an FTP service? There's all kinds of things to consider here. There is no cookie cutter answer. Cloud is wonderful. We use cloud all the time to actually enable mid-sized companies to make this economical, but it is not, I think, a no-brainer. You have to look at the situation because there's plenty of situations where it's not the right answer.
All right. On that, we wrap today. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Take care.
Thanks again for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment below. Our contact information is in the description. See you in the next episode.